Welcome back. And thank you for joining us here at the Wandering Pilgrims for our history series, where we take a closer look at the Christian influences, providence, and God's divine hand in shaping the early years of America and history at large. Today, we'll be talking about a woman whose name is often overshadowed by that of her famous husband, but whose character, faith, and influence played a significant role in the story of our nation's birth. Dorothy Quincy Hancock, the wife of John Hancock. Before we dive into Dorothy's life, let's take a moment to remind ourselves of the role that Christian values, providence, and the faith of these founders played in shaping America. Dorothy's story is one of deep faith, resilience, and courage. In many ways, it mirrors the very virtues that her husband, John Hancock, embodied. But while John is known for his bold signature on the Declaration of Independence, Dorothy's role has often been relegated to the background. Today, we want to bring her story into the light and examine her life from a Reformed Christian perspective, reflecting on the way God's providence guided her through tumultuous times. Dorothy Quincy was born on May 10, 1747, in Quincy, Massachusetts, into a family with a strong sense of duty and patriotism. Her father, Judge Edmund Quincy, was a prominent figure in Massachusetts society and an early advocate for colonial rights. Dorothy's upbringing was sheltered in the sense that she came from a wealthy, well-regulated New England home, one marked by strong moral standards and a deep appreciation for education. Her mother, Elizabeth Wendell, was a woman of great character who valued both intellectual pursuits and social interaction. This combination of wealth, character, and influence made the Quincy household a gathering place for many of the important figures of the time, men like John Adams, Samuel Adams, and Dr. Joseph Warren. John Adams, in particular, was a frequent visitor, and his diaries reflect that he had numerous conversations with Judge Quincy. It was in this environment that Dorothy grew up, surrounded by powerful ideas about liberty, justice, and the growing discontent with British rule. As a young woman, Dorothy's beauty and intelligence caught the eye of none other than John Hancock, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in Massachusetts. At the time, John Hancock was already deeply involved in the struggle for American independence, and it's said that Dorothy was just as enthusiastic a patriot as her future husband. The two became a couple, and she was not only drawn to Hancock's character, but also to the cause that he was passionate about, freedom and independence for the American colonies. The Quincy household, led by Dorothy's father, was a hotbed for revolutionary ideas. Judge Quincy himself was a committed patriot, and his home became a meeting place for men like Samuel Adams and James Otis, who were vocal in their opposition to British oppression. Dorothy, raised in this environment, was no stranger to the tensions brewing in the colonies. She supported her fiancé's efforts, and as the Revolutionary War began to unfold, she became directly involved in the events that would change the course of American history. In early 1775, Dorothy found herself in a precarious position. As tensions escalated between the British and the colonists, John Hancock had moved out of Boston for his safety. But when the Battle of Lexington reached them, Dorothy, along with her fiancé and his Aunt Lydia, by chance, were present at the scene of the first major battle of the Revolution. She and his aunt remained in Lexington while John, with his fellow patriot Sam Adams, watched the battle unfold from a nearby wooded hill. Dorothy, though not involved in the fighting, was an eyewitness to history. She witnessed the aftermath of the battle, including the arrival of wounded soldiers. Her account of the events is poignant and vivid, describing how one soldier, who had been grazed by a bullet, claimed he was dead, while another, shot through the arm, maintained a bit more composure. But after the dust settled, Dorothy was faced with a dilemma. She wanted to return to Boston to be with her father, but John Hancock, ever the protector, would not allow it. He insisted she stay with Aunt Lydia for her safety, refusing to let her return to the city until British troops were no longer a threat. Dorothy, no doubt shaken by the events of the day, initially protested, but in the end, she stayed with his aunt for several months. It was a brief, yet tense time in their lives, but it was also a time in which their faith and convictions were strengthened. In the midst of war and political upheaval, Dorothy and John Hancock were married on August 23, 1775, in Fairfield, Connecticut. The ceremony was performed by Reverend Andrew Elliot, a man of faith whose leadership was instrumental in both the spiritual and political realms. This was a union not only of two people in love, but also of two individuals who shared a deep commitment to the cause of American independence. Following their marriage, the couple traveled to Philadelphia, where John was busy with his duties as president of the Continental Congress. Dorothy, though new to this world of politics and revolution, adapted quickly. She was not merely the wife of a prominent man, but an active participant in the social and political circles of the day. Her role as a supportive spouse was evident in the many letters John wrote to her, expressing his love and admiration. In his correspondence, he frequently lamented her lack of letters to him, showcasing not only his affection, but also the deep connection they shared in their marriage. Throughout the war, Dorothy remained a steadfast partner to her husband. She became a friend to Martha Washington, often exchanging visits during the winters spent in Cambridge, and was part of the social fabric that helped sustain the morale of those in leadership positions. Despite the challenges they faced as a young couple during a war, Dorothy remained grounded in her faith and in her commitment to her husband and to the cause of liberty. After the war, Dorothy and John Hancock's life didn't slow down. They entertained many prominent guests, including Marquis de Lafayette and French Admiral d'Estaing, both important figures in the Revolution. Yet, despite the outward appearances of wealth and influence, their personal lives were touched by sorrow. Dorothy gave birth to two children, but both died young, one as an infant and the other at the age of 9. It was a heartbreak that Dorothy, in her quiet strength, bore with grace. When John Hancock passed away in 1793, Dorothy's life entered a new chapter. Several years later, she remarried a Captain Scott, a friend of her late husband. She lived a more retired life in Boston until her death several years later. But even in her later years, her influence and character were remembered by those who knew her. As we reflect on Dorothy Hancock's life, we see a woman who, though not always in the spotlight, was deeply involved in the founding of America. Her faith in God, her loyalty to her husband, and her commitment to the cause of liberty made her a significant figure in the Revolution, one who stood alongside John Hancock as a partner in both marriage and in the battle for freedom. Dorothy's story reminds us that God's providence works through both men and women, shaping the course of history through their faithfulness. Dorothy was not just the wife of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. She was a woman of character, a woman who, like many of the other wives of the Founding Fathers, played a crucial role in sustaining their husbands, supporting their endeavors, and providing a home amidst the chaos of revolution. Her life is a testament to the strength of Christian women who, even in the most difficult of times, trusted in God's plan and walked in faith. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Wandering Pilgrims. As we continue to explore the lives of those who helped shape this great nation and world history, let us remember that their stories are not just about political deeds, but about faith, courage, and God's sovereign hand at work in the lives of ordinary men and women. Dorothy Hancock's story is one of quiet strength, faith in God's plan, and support for the cause of liberty. She, like her husband, is part of the providential story of America's founding. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. And if you would like to help us create more like this, please consider supporting our efforts through Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, and our shop. You can also find other resources and graphics about Dorothy and others we cover here on our podcast on our website and our Instagram and Facebook pages. You can find all of those links in the description. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Dorothy Hancock and other women of faith during the Revolutionary Era. And don't forget to check out our other episodes about world history, church history, and the chapter books that come out every week.